Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell stood at the entrance of Camp Pendleton, her dress blues pristine despite the long flight from Afghanistan. After 18 months of commanding combat operations, she was finally home. Her bronze star gleamed in the California sun, but the weight on her shoulders had nothing to do with medals. She had lost 6 Marines under her command, good men and women who trusted her decisions. Their faces haunted her quiet moments, but she carried their memory with the same strength she'd shown in the field. The base bustled with afternoon activity. Young Marines jogged past in formation, their cadence calls echoing across the parade grounds. Sarah breathed in the familiar scent of ocean air mixed with diesel fuel. Home. At the base exchange, she stopped to grab supplies. Her uniform drew respectful nods from enlisted personnel, quick salutes that she returned with practiced ease. But at the checkout counter, she overheard 2 male Marines talking near the magazine rack. "That's Mitchell," one muttered to his companion, "the one who got the Bronze Star." "Yeah, right," the other scoffed. "Probably got it for filing paperwork. You know how it is with female officers. They get the easy assignments, then get decorated for doing nothing." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes forward. She'd heard worse in her 20 years of service. The first Marine continued. "My buddy was in her unit, said she made some real questionable calls, lost people because she wanted to play hero." "Typical," his friend agreed. "They promote these women to fill quotas, not because they can actually lead. Bet she spent most of her deployment in an air-conditioned office." The cashier, a young lance corporal, glanced nervously between Sarah and the 2 Marines. Sarah simply handed over her credit card, her expression neutral. She'd learned long ago that responding to ignorance rarely changed minds. As she left the exchange, she heard one of them say, "Look at her, walking like she owns the place. Bet she couldn't handle a real firefight." Sarah paused at the door, her hand on the handle. For a moment, she considered turning around, considered telling them about the 72 hours she'd spent under siege, making life-or-death decisions while mortar rounds shook the walls around her. About holding a dying Marine in her arms while coordinating air support with her free hand. Instead, she walked out into the sunlight. Her phone buzzed, a text from her daughter Emma, now a senior at San Diego State. "Mom, can't wait to see you tonight. Dad's grilling your favorite." Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in weeks. Her family was her anchor, the reason she could face each day with purpose. The drive home to Oceanside took 30 minutes. Their modest house sat on a quiet street lined with palm trees. The American flag on their porch fluttered in the breeze, just as it had every day she'd been gone. Her husband, Tom, emerged from the front door before she could even park. A retired Navy chief, he understood the weight she carried. No words were needed as he wrapped her in his arms. "Sarah," he whispered into her hair, "welcome home." Emma bounded out next, all energy and joy. "Mom, you look amazing. Tell me everything, well, everything you can tell me." Over dinner, Sarah shared the safe stories. The sandstorms that turned day into night, the local children who loved American chocolate, the way stars looked in the desert sky. She didn't mention the ambush on Route Crimson. She didn't talk about Corporal Thompson, who'd taken a bullet meant for her. Tom noticed the shadows in her eyes but said nothing. There would be time for those conversations later, in the darkness of their bedroom, where tears could fall unseen. The next morning, Sarah reported to her new position at Camp Pendleton. She would be overseeing training operations, preparing young Marines for deployment. It was important work, even if some saw it as a step down from combat command. Her new office was smaller than her field command post had been. She arranged her few personal items, a photo of Tom and Emma, her combat medals in a simple frame, a small wooden cross that had belonged to her grandmother. A knock at the door interrupted her unpacking. Major James Crawford stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Colonel Mitchell," he said formally, "welcome to Training Command." "Thank you, Major Crawford." He entered uninvited, closing the door behind him. "I'll be honest with you, Colonel. Some of us were surprised by your assignment here. This position usually goes to someone with more traditional experience." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "And what would you consider traditional experience, Major?" "Well," he shifted uncomfortably, "someone who spent more time in administrative roles. Training command requires a certain finesse." "I see," Sarah's voice remained level, and my 3 combat tour don't provide that finesse. Crawford's face reddened slightly. I'm not questioning your service, Colonel. I'm simply saying that combat and training are very different skill sets. Some of us worry that, well, that you might bring too much aggression to the role. Aggression, Sarah repeated the word slowly. Is that what you call leadership under fire? That's not what I meant. Major Crawford, Sarah stood, her full height bringing her eye with him. I've trained Marines in combat zones where a mistake meant death. I think I can handle teaching them in the safety of Camp Pendleton. Crawford straightened. Of course, Colonel, I meant no disrespect. But his eyes said otherwise as he left her office. 2 weeks into her new position, Sarah had established a routine. Morning PT at 500, office hours until noon, afternoon training observations, evening paperwork. She pushed aside the whispers that followed her through the halls, focused on the mission. The training fields sprawled across the base's eastern section. Today, she observed urban combat drills, watching instructors guide squads through mock city blocks. The scenarios were good but lacked the chaos of real combat. Hold, she called out, stepping onto the training ground. The instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, turned to her with barely concealed irritation. Colonel, your opposition force is too predictable, Sarah explained. In actual urban combat, enemies don't always appear in windows. They use murder holes, false walls, underground tunnels. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. With respect, Colonel, we follow the approved training manual. The manual was written by people who haven't seen combat in 20 years, Sarah replied. Let me show you something. She gathered the trainees, young faces eager but untested. Who can tell me the most dangerous spot in urban combat? Several hands shot up. Rooftops, windows, doorways. Sarah shook her head. The place you think is safe. The wall you're using for cover might have an IED behind it. The empty room might have a false floor. Combat is about expecting the unexpected. She spent the next hour restructuring the exercise, adding elements of unpredictability. Hidden opposition forces in unexpected places. Simulated civilians who might be threats. Communications that cut out at critical moments. The Marines struggled at first, their textbook tactics failing against the chaotic scenario. But slowly they adapted. They learned to think, not just react. Major Crawford watched from the observation tower, his expression dark. When the exercise ended, he intercepted Sarah. Colonel Mitchell, a word. His office was meticulously organized, awards and commendations covering one wall. Sarah noticed most were administrative achievements. Colonel, I've received complaints about your interference with established training protocols. From Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez. Among others, Crawford leaned back in his chair. You can't just change procedures that have been in place for years. Those procedures are getting Marines killed overseas, Sarah said bluntly. Crawford's face flushed. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. I've seen the results of outdated training. Marines who freeze when reality doesn't match their textbook scenarios. Your combat experience doesn't make you an expert on training doctrine. Sarah stood. No, but it makes me an expert on what actually happens in combat. If that threatens you, perhaps you should examine why. She left before he could respond. That evening, Tom found her on their back porch, staring at the ocean in the distance. Rough day, he asked, handing her a cup of tea. They don't want to hear it, Tom. They want to keep doing things the way they've always done them. Change is hard, he said gently, especially for people who have never had to adapt under fire. These kids deserve better. They deserve training that will actually save their lives. Tom sat beside her. Then give it to them. You've never backed down from a fight that mattered. The next morning, Sarah arrived to find her parking space blocked by 2 vehicles. When she found another spot and entered the building, conversations stopped mid-sentence. The hostility was palpable. In the break room, she overheard Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez talking to other instructors. She thinks she knows everything because she's got some combat ribbons, disrupting our entire program because she wants to play hero again. I heard she got people killed because she wouldn't follow procedures, another voice added. Now she wants to throw out our procedures too. Sarah poured her coffee in silence. Rodriguez noticed her and didn't lower his voice. Some people can't transition from combat to garrison. They need the adrenaline, the glory, can't handle normal military life. She turned to face them. Gunnery Sergeant, if you have concerns about my methods, you're welcome to address them directly. Rodriguez met her gaze defiantly. I've been training Marines for 15 years, Colonel, successfully. And how many of those Marines have you followed up with after deployment? How many came back and told you what worked and what didn't? Silence. Sarah continued. I've written letters to the families of Marines who died because their training didn't prepare them for reality. Have you? Rodriguez's face darkened. You don't know anything about. An alarm cut through the building. Not a drill alarm, the emergency response signal. Sarah's phone buzzed with an alert. Active shooter reported at the base school. All available personnel respond. Without hesitation, Sarah sprinted for the door. Behind her, she heard Rodriguez shouting for someone to call the MPs, to follow protocol, to wait for proper authorization. She didn't wait. The base elementary school sat 2 miles from the training command. Sarah's vehicle screeched into the parking lot as military police were still establishing a perimeter. Panicked parents pressed against the barriers, teachers huddled with evacuated children on the playground. But not all the children were out. Status, Sarah demanded of the ranking MP. The sergeant looked at her rank and insignia. Colonel, we're waiting for the tactical team. 2 classrooms still inside, possible hostage situation. Through the school's windows, Sarah could see movement. A figure packing, agitated, the distinct outline of a weapon. How long for tactical? 15 minutes, maybe 20. Too long, every instinct screamed that they didn't have that time. A woman broke through the crowd, grabbing Sarah's arm. My daughter's in there, 2nd grade, Mrs. Peterson's class, please. Sarah recognized the terror in the mother's eyes. She'd seen it in Afghan villages, in Iraqi cities, the universal fear of a parent for their child. What's your daughter's name? Lily Martinez. She's only 7. Sarah squeezed the woman's hand. We'll get her out. The MP sergeant stepped forward. Colonel, protocol states. I know what protocol states, Sergeant. Sarah's mind was already mapping the building, remembering the layout from a school visit months ago. Single-story, long hallway, classrooms on both sides. Her phone buzzed. Major Crawford, she ignored it. Movement in a window caught her eye. A young Marine, couldn't be more than 19, wild-eyed and clearly unstable. She recognized the signs, combat stress, probably PTSD triggered by something. Do we know who he is? Lance Corporal Derek Thompson, just back from Syria last month. His squad leader said he's been struggling. Sarah's heart sank. Another wounded warrior failed by the system meant to help him, but right now he was a threat to innocent children. More vehicles arrived, Rodriguez and Crawford among them. Crawford immediately took charge, or tried to. Colonel Mitchell, this is a military police matter. You need to step back. Sarah ignored him, studying the building. There was a maintenance entrance on the east side, probably unlocked. Windows in each classroom, but covered by blinds. Colonel, Crawford's voice was sharp. You're not authorized. A gunshot from inside the school cut him off. Screams erupted from the crowd. Without conscious thought, Sarah moved. 20 years of combat experience guided her feet as she sprinted toward the maintenance door. Stand down, Crawford shouted. That's an order. But Sarah was already gone, muscle memory taking over. The door was unlocked as she'd hoped. She slipped inside, her senses hyper-alert. The hallway stretched before her, fluorescent lights humming. Somewhere, children were whimpering. The sound tore at her heart, but she pushed emotion aside. Mission first. She moved silently, years of urban combat training making her steps soundless. At the first classroom, she peered through the door's window, empty. The second, the same. Then she heard his voice, high and strained. I didn't mean to, they don't understand, no one understands. Third door on the left, Mrs. Peterson's class. Sarah could see him through the narrow window. Lance Corporal Thompson paced between desks where children cowered. His rifle, thank God, just a rifle, not automatic, swung wildly as he gestured. Mrs. Peterson, a woman in her 60s, stood between him and the children. Brave, so brave. Derek, the teacher said gently, these children aren't your enemy, you're safe here. Safe, he laughed, a broken sound. There's no safe. They're everywhere, in the walls, under the ground. You can't see them until it's too late. Sarah understood. He wasn't in California anymore. In his mind, he was back in Syria, trapped in a nightmare loop. She eased the door open a centimeter at a time. They sent me home, Thompson continued, his back to the door. Said I was fine, but I'm not fine. None of us are fine. Sarah slipped inside. One of the children, a little girl with pigtails, Lily Martinez, saw her and gasped. Thompson spun around. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other, Marine to Marine. Sarah saw the recognition in his eyes, the momentary clarity. Colonel. Hello, Derek. Sarah kept her voice calm, steady. Tough day. He laughed again, that broken sound. Every day is tough, ma'am, every single day. I know, she took a step closer. I have them too, the nightmares, the flashbacks. Confusion crossed his face. But you're an officer, a woman. That doesn't make me immune, Marine. Behind Thompson, Mrs. Peterson quietly began moving children toward the far corner of the room. Smart woman. They don't get it, Thompson said, his weapon drooping. The civilians, they think we come home and everything's normal, but it's not. It's never normal again. Sarah took another step. No, it's not, but these children, Derek, they're not the enemy. Look at them. Thompson glanced back at the huddled students, his face crumpled. Oh God, what am I doing? You're hurting, Sarah said simply. And you came to the one place that felt familiar, a school, like the ones we protected overseas. You're not a bad Marine, Derek, you're a wounded one. Tears streamed down his face. I can't make it stop. The noise, the memories. I know, Sarah was close now, close enough to reach out. But this isn't the answer. Your squad needs you to fight this battle differently. My squad is gone, the weapon came up again. Morrison, Johnson, Chen, all gone. I should have died with them. Sarah's heart broke for him. Survivor's guilt, the invisible wound that claimed so many warriors. But you didn't die, she said firmly. You lived, and that means something. These children, they need you to be the Marine who protects, not threatens. Thompson looked at the weapon in his hands as if seeing it for the first time. I didn't mean. I know, Sarah extended her hand. Let me help you, Marine. Let me take the weapon and we'll face this together. No Marine left behind, remember. For an endless moment, Thompson wavered. Outside, Sarah could hear vehicles, voices, the tactical team preparing to breach. Derek, she said urgently, trust me, Marine to Marine. Something in her voice reached him. Slowly, carefully, he reversed the rifle and placed it in her hands. The relief nearly buckled her knees, but she stayed steady. Mrs. Peterson, evacuate your students, now. The teacher didn't need to be told twice. Within seconds, she had the children moving toward the door in a quiet, orderly line. Thompson collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Sarah safed the weapon and knelt beside him. You're going to get help, Derek, real help this time. The door burst open. Tactical team members flooded in, weapons raised. Stand down, Sarah commanded. The situation is contained. This Marine needs medical attention, not arrest. Part 4, The Reckoning. The aftermath came in waves. First, the relief as parents reunited with children. Sarah watched Lily Martinez run into her mother's arms, both of them crying. The woman caught Sarah's eye over her daughter's head, mouthing thank you through her tears. Then came the bureaucracy. Military police took Derek Thompson into custody, despite Sarah's protests that he needed psychiatric care, not jail. She filled out reports, gave statements, endured Crawford's lecture about chain of command and proper procedures. You could have gotten those children killed, Crawford raged in his office. You're not tactical response. You're not even military police. You're a training officer who couldn't follow basic protocol. Sarah sat quietly through his tirade. When he finally paused for breath, she spoke. How many active shooter situations have you responded to, Major? His face reddened. That's not relevant. I've cleared 7 buildings with potential hostiles inside. 4 in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan. In my experience, waiting for perfect conditions gets people killed. This isn't a combat zone. Tell that to Derek Thompson. Sarah stood. Tell that to any veterans struggling with invisible wounds. We train them to be warriors, then act surprised when they can't just turn it off. She left his office to find Rodriguez waiting in the hallway. His expression was unreadable. Colonel, he started, then stopped, cleared his throat. My daughter goes to that school, different class, but... Sarah waited. Thank you, he said simply, then walked away. Over the next days, the base buzzed with controversy. Some praised Sarah's actions, others condemned them. The official investigation continued, statements collected, procedures reviewed. Sarah focused on her work, implementing changes to the training program despite resistance. She added modules on stress management, on recognizing PTSD symptoms, on transitioning from combat to civilian life. More importantly, she visited Derek Thompson. The psychiatric ward at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton was quiet, sterile. Derek looked smaller in the hospital gown, younger than his 22 years. Colonel, he struggled to sit up. I'm so sorry I could have those kids. But you didn't, Sarah said firmly. When it mattered, you made the right choice. I'm getting discharged, other than honorable. His voice was bitter. 20 months in Syria, and this is how it ends. It's not an ending, Derek. It's a transition. Sarah pulled up a chair. I'm working with JAG to get that changed to medical retirement. You were wounded in service to your country, just not in a visible way. Hope flickered in his eyes. You do that. Marines don't leave Marines behind. Not in combat, not here. She spent an hour with him, talking about resources, about therapy, about the long road ahead. When she left, he was sitting straighter. That evening, Tom found her reviewing training manuals at their kitchen table. You're rewriting the entire program, he observed. Someone has to, Sarah rubbed her eyes. We're failing them, Tom. We teach them to be perfect warriors, then abandon them when the war follows them home. You can't save them all, Sarah. No, she agreed, but I can try to prepare them better. Her phone rang, an unknown number, but she recognized the area code, Pentagon. Colonel Mitchell, the voice was crisp, professional. This is Admiral Patricia Hayes. I understand you've had an interesting week. Sarah's stomach dropped. An admiral calling personally was rarely good news. Yes, ma'am. I've been reviewing your record. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, 3 combat tour, and now you're revolutionizing training protocols while saving children. You've certainly been busy. Sarah remained silent, uncertain where this was leading. I'll be visiting Camp Pendleton tomorrow. I'd like to meet with you personally. 800 Base Commander's Conference Room. Yes, ma'am. The line went dead. Tom raised an eyebrow. Admiral. Patricia Hayes. She's in charge of training and education for the entire Marine Corps. Is that good or bad? Sarah honestly didn't know. The next morning she arrived early. Crawford was already there, along with the base commander and several other senior officers. Crawford looked smug, clearly expecting Sarah to be censured. Admiral Hayes entered precisely at 800. She was smaller than Sarah expected, but her presence filled the room. Everyone rose to attention. Sit, Hayes commanded, her eyes fixed on Sarah. Colonel Mitchell, tell me about your training modifications. Sarah outlined her changes, the resistance she'd faced, the results she'd already seen. Hayes listened without interruption. And the incident at the school. A Marine in crisis, ma'am, failed by our support systems. Crawford couldn't contain himself. She violated every protocol. Hayes silenced him with a look. Major, when were you last in combat? Crawford's face flushed. I've served honorably in administrative positions. That wasn't what I asked. Hayes turned back to Sarah. Continue. Sarah explained her actions, her reasoning, the outcome. When she finished, Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Gentlemen, Hayes said finally, do you know what the #1 cause of military casualties has been for the past 5 years? Silence. Suicide, Hayes said bluntly. We lose more Marines to their own hands than to enemy action, and do you know why? More silence. Because we train them for war but not for peace. We create warriors but don't teach them how to be civilians again. She looked at Crawford. Your perfect protocols don't account for the human cost of combat. Crawford shifted uncomfortably. Colonel Mitchell, Hayes continued. I've reviewed your proposed training modifications. I'm implementing them corps-wide, effective immediately. Sarah blinked in surprise. Crawford's mouth fell open. Furthermore, Hayes stood. I'm promoting you to full colonel and putting you in charge of developing a comprehensive combat-to-civilian transition program. You'll report directly to me. Ma'am, Crawford protested, the chain of command is about to change, Hayes said coldly. Major Crawford, you're being transferred to Supply Administration in 29 Palms. Perhaps sometime in the desert will give you perspective on what real military service means. Crawford's face went from red to white. Hayes addressed the room. For too long, we've treated combat stress as weakness, treated our wounded warriors as problems to be managed rather than heroes to be helped. That changes now. She turned to Sarah, Colonel Mitchell, Lance Corporal Thompson. Receiving treatment, ma'am, responding well. Good, I want him in the pilot program for your transition training. If he agrees, of course. I'm sure he will, ma'am. Hayes moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Colonel, my granddaughter was in Mrs. Peterson's class. Lily mentioned a brave. 6 months later, Colonel Sarah Mitchell stood before an auditorium filled with Marines. Not just any Marines, these were combat veterans preparing to transition home. The pilot program had expanded from Camp Pendleton to bases across the country. Derek Thompson sat in the front row, wearing civilian clothes but still carrying himself like a Marine. He was her first success story, now working as a peer counselor for other struggling veterans. Welcome to Week 1 of the Combat Transition Initiative, Sarah began. Some of you volunteered for this program. Some were voluntold. Either way, you're here because you've served in combat, and now you're facing the hardest mission of all, coming home. She saw the skepticism in some faces, the same doubt she'd faced from Crawford and others. But she also saw hope in eyes that had seen too much. I'm not here to tell you it's easy, Sarah continued. I'm not here to pretend that what you've experienced can be fixed with a PowerPoint presentation and some breathing exercises. I'm here because I've walked in your boots. She clicked to her first slide, not statistics or bullet points, but photos. Her squad in Afghanistan, the faces of the 6 Marines she'd lost. Corporal James Chen, 19 years old, loved baseball and his mom's cooking. Lance Corporal Maria Santos, 21, joined the Marines to pay for college, private first class. She named them all. The room was silent, respectful. They understood this ritual, this honoring of the fallen. I carry them with me every day, Sarah said. Some nights I still see their faces, still question my decisions. That's not weakness, that's humanity. Over the next hour, she laid out the program. Not just coping strategies, but practical skills. Financial planning for civilian life. Translation of military skills to civilian resumes. Family reintegration techniques developed by psychologists who actually understood combat stress. Most importantly, peer support groups led by veterans who'd successfully made the transition. You're not broken, Sarah emphasized. You're changed, and that change can be a strength if you learn to channel it. After the session, a young female Marine approached her. Lance Corporal Ashley Williams, according to her name tag. Ma'am, Williams hesitated. I heard about what you did, at the school I mean, and before in Afghanistan. Sarah waited. They told me female Marines don't see real combat, that we're just there to fill quotas. Williams' voice was bitter. But I was in Kabul when it fell, I fought, I lost friends, and when I came home everyone acted like I'd been on vacation. I know, Sarah said simply. How do you do it? How do you make them see? Sarah considered her words carefully. You don't make them see. You just keep doing your job, being excellent, and eventually the work speaks for itself. And you find the people who do see, who do understand. Build your support network with them. Williams nodded slowly. Thank you, ma'am. As the young Marine left, Sarah's phone buzzed. Admiral Hayes. Patricia, Sarah answered. They'd moved to first names months ago. Sarah, I have news. The Secretary of Defense wants to expand your program to all branches. Army, Navy, Air Force. You'd be promoted to Brigadier General, overseeing implementation across the entire military. Sarah sank into a chair. Brigadier General she'd never imagined. I need an answer by Monday, Patricia continued. But Sarah, you've earned this. Your program has already reduced suicide rates by 30% in participating units. That's not just statistics, that's lives saved. After the call, Sarah walked to her car in a daze. General Mitchell, the girl from small-town Texas who joined the Marines at 18 because she couldn't afford college. Her phone rang again, this time Tom. Hey, Marine, his warm voice grounded her. Emma's here for dinner, you coming home? Home, such a simple word that meant everything. On my way. She drove through the base, past the training grounds where Rodriguez now implemented her combat scenarios, past the school where children learned without fear, past the psychiatric ward where broken warriors learned to heal. At a stoplight, she noticed a car beside her. Crawford, still waiting for his transfer to process, stared straight ahead, pretending not to see her. She thought about rolling down her window, saying something. But what was there to say? He'd chosen his path, clinging to outdated procedures and personal prejudice. She'd chosen hers, fighting for change despite the resistance. The light turned green. Sarah drove home to her family. That evening, as she helped Tom with dishes, Emma chatted about her graduate school applications. "I've decided on social work," Emma announced, "specifically veteran services." Sarah paused, dish towel in hand. "Really?" "Mom, I've watched you for 6 months. The lives you're changing, the difference you're making. I want to be part of that." Sarah hugged her daughter, tears threatening. "It's not easy work." "The important stuff never is," Emma replied. "You taught me that." Later on the back porch, Tom asked, "Did you tell her about the promotion?" "Not yet." "General Mitchell," he mused, "has a nice ring to it. It means moving to D.C., leaving California." "I know," he took her hand. "Sarah, I've followed you for 25 years, through deployments, through danger, through everything. D.C. is nothing compared to Fallujah." "You'd do that?" "You're changing the military, Sarah, making it better for everyone who serves. How could I not support that?" She leaned against him, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The same stars she'd watched in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in all the places that had shaped her. Monday morning, she called Admiral Hayes. "I accept." "Outstanding. The announcement will be next week. Fair warning, there will be resistance. Some people still think combat experience doesn't translate to policy making." Sarah smiled. "I've dealt with resistance before." The ceremony was held at the Pentagon. Sarah stood in her dress blues as Admiral Hayes pinned on her first star. In the audience, Tom and Emma beamed with pride. Derek Thompson was there, healthy and whole. Rodriguez, now a close ally, even Mrs. Peterson had come. As she gave her acceptance speech, Sarah thought about that day at the base exchange. Those Marines who'd mocked her service questioned her worth. She wondered if they were watching the news, seeing her promotion. But it didn't matter what they thought. What mattered were the thousands of veterans who would get better support, better training, better understanding because of the changes she'd fought for. "Leadership," she said to the assembled crowd, "isn't about rank or gender or fitting someone's preconceived notions. It's about taking care of your people. It's about having the courage to change what's broken, even when everyone tells you to leave it alone." She looked at the faces before her, military and civilian, young and old, all united in service. Every Marine, soldier, sailor, and airman who served in combat carries invisible weight. My mission, our mission, is to help them carry it, to show them that strength isn't about suffering in silence, but about having the courage to seek help. The applause was thunderous. Later at the reception, a young reporter asked, "General Mitchell, what would you say to those who doubted you could lead?" Sarah considered the question. "I'd say that true authority doesn't come from rank or recognition. It comes from understanding the people you lead, from sharing their struggles, from never forgetting that leadership is service." She paused, then added, "And I'd say that the Marines who once mocked my service taught me something valuable, that changing minds takes time, but changing lives is immediate." I chose to focus on the latter. As the reception continued, Sarah noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Major Crawford, now Captain Crawford after his demotion, stood near the exit, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither moved. Then Crawford raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute. Sarah returned it crisply. He turned and left without a word. Tom appeared at her elbow. "Was that?" "Yes." "Interesting." Sarah shrugged. "People can surprise you." As the evening wore on, Sarah mingled with officials, advocates, and fellow officers. Each had a story, a connection to the mission she now led. A mother whose son had taken his life after 3 tours in Iraq. A Vietnam veteran who wished such programs had existed 40 years ago. A young soldier, fresh from Syria, who'd heard about her program and had hope for the first time since coming home. These were the people who mattered. These were the reasons she'd keep fighting. Near midnight, as the reception wound down, Admiral Hayes pulled her aside. "You know this is just the beginning," Patricia warned. "The bureaucracy, the politics, the constant battle for funding and support." "I know. Any regrets?" Sarah looked around the room, at Tom laughing with Emma, at Derek Thompson mentoring a younger veteran, at all the lives already touched by change. "Not one," she said firmly. As they left the Pentagon, Emma linked her arm through Sarah's. "I'm proud of you, Mom, not for the rank or the recognition, for staying true to yourself when everyone tried to make you be something else." Sarah squeezed her daughter's arm. "Remember that, sweetheart. The hardest battles aren't always on battlefields. Sometimes they're in conference rooms and offices, fighting for what's right even when it's unpopular." The night air was cool, autumn crisp. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new resistance, new battles to fight. But tonight, General Sarah Mitchell, was exactly where she needed to be. Walking toward their car, Tom asked, "What's next, General?" Sarah smiled. "We change the world one veteran at a time." In the distance, the Pentagon stood illuminated against the night sky. Inside those walls, policies would be written, programs implemented, lives saved because one Marine refused to be silenced, refused to be diminished, refused to accept that things couldn't be better. The young Marines who'd mocked her rank had been wrong about many things, but they'd been right about one: she did walk like she owned the place. Because in a way, she did. Not through arrogance or ambition, but through service, sacrifice, and the unshakable belief that every warrior deserved to come home whole. And that authority, the authority earned in combat, forged in compassion, and proven in action, was the only kind that truly mattered.